Good morning, everyone. This is Chris Hoffman. I'm the Executive Director of Reach Out and Read Minnesota, and welcome. I'm coming to you live from our daughter's very purple playroom / my husband's new home office. So to start today, we're going to start like we usually do, which is with a few great dad jokes brought to you by Dr. Nate Chawla.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you again so much for joining us. We are so appreciative that you could join us this year, and you're starting your morning off by supporting Reach Out and Read Minnesota. And what would a Reach Out and Read Minnesota breakfast be like without some, you guessed it, dad jokes? So I recruited a little bit of help, and we're going to deliver you some dad jokes to start off our wonderful program here today. But I just wanted to say thank you again so much, particularly on behalf of the Board of Directors. We know how important your support is to the work we do and how we really are changing the trajectory of our children's lives, our families' lives across the state of Minnesota, and we look forward to doing that for years to come. So your support is crucial. Thank you again so much for doing it, or for coming through today, and really hope you do enjoy a couple of dad jokes to start your day. How you doing, Shai? Nice. Well, I thought I would practice some of my jokes. So how about this one? What is faster, hot or cold?
Cold.
No, it's hot. You know why?
Hot.
It's hot because you can catch a cold.
Ah!
Thank you. How about this one? Why did the motorcycle stay at home? Because, you know, everyone's staying at home, hopefully, nowadays. Why did the motorcycle stay at home?
It's too tired.
It is too tired. Yes, you already knew that one because Dad's used it before. All right, and then the last one. We're all on computers nowadays. What does the computer call its father?
Dada.
Data! That's a great one. Yeah, that's it, exactly. The computer calls its father Data. All right, did you have fun telling jokes?
I did.
All right.
All right. Thank you, Nate, so much for getting us started this morning, and to his son as well. Once again, welcome to the 2020 virtual event. We know that many of you have joined us in person in the past, and we really wish we were sharing a breakfast in person with you, but we thank you so much for being present today with us. And for our many new folks who would normally not be able to join us in person from around the state and other parts of the country, welcome. We will be taking questions live for our panelists, Dr. Gunnar and Dr. Gigi Chawla. So if you have a question while they're talking, please put it in the Q&A section, which you'll find at the bottom of the screen. And if you haven't had a chance to preview the program for today, there was a link that was sent out yesterday in the email with the link for this event today. So please go ahead and check that out. There's a lot of information on those documents that we won't be able to cover today. And also thanks to our great volunteer, Carol Brumwell, and our graphic designer, Andy Burnt, for very quickly pulling those pieces together for us. And if you're going to share this event on social media, which we hope you do, please use the hashtag #ReadTogether. So as mentioned previously, I'm Chris Hoffman, and I'm the proud executive director of Reach Out and Read Minnesota. And as I usually do, I'd like to start out the morning by giving some thank yous. So when we realized we would need to cancel the in-person event this year, we went back to our sponsors, and we of course had no idea if we were going to have any event virtually or at all. And within minutes, all of them came back and agreed immediately to keep supporting us. So for that, we're very grateful. Many of our sponsors are major healthcare systems who themselves are having a lot of challenges right now. So we really think that their commitment to this event today underscores their long-term commitment to Reach Out and Read. So I really want to thank our first ever executive partner, Health Partners. They've really supported us in many ways over the past years, but especially in the last year, they basically loaned us their staff at the Capitol to help us navigate the Capitol and secure state funding. So we're really, really grateful for just the number of ways in which they partner with us. And next, as our leadership partner, we have Children's Minnesota. So thank you so much to Children's, and you'll be hearing more about our partnership with Children's later in the morning when Dr. Chawla talks about that. And then last but definitely not least, we have our literacy partners, All About Books, Alina Health, M Health Fairview, and UCare. And a lot of these sponsors have just supported us for years, and we're really, really appreciative. I also just want to take a moment to call out our foundation funders. There is a list of those funders on our website that you can read, but we've had 3 new to us funders in the past year that has been really significant for us. The Hugh J. Anderson Foundation, the Richard M. Scholes Family Foundation, and the Cerisi Walburn Foundation for Children. So thank you. And finally, I wish I was able to introduce our staff and board to you in person this morning, so this will have to suffice. But we actually added 2 new staff members in 2019. So one of them is Liam Mackham, who is our communications guru and is making this event happen right now. So thanks, Liam. And our other staff person is Kate Beliveau, and she is our first ever program specialist in Greater Minnesota. She lives in the Bemidji area. And then we're rounded out by our fantastic program coordinator, Ellen Clues, and our fantastic program specialist, Jen Udermark. And then, of course, a huge thank you to our 12 very active and engaged board members. We added 2 new board members this year, so it's been an exciting year as they led us through a 3-year strategic planning process. So I just want to share a couple updates before we move on to our next speaker. So as most of you know, we received state funding for the first time this year. And with this funding, we were able to do a few things. We were able to hire Kate in Bemidji, and she was able to spend many, many, many hours driving all over Northwest Minnesota and visiting our 18 clinics in that region and supporting them. And then we were able to bring on 14 new clinics in Greater Minnesota, which was our focus this year. And we were able to buy them their first year of books, which allows us to plan with them for longer term community supported funding. So we purchased over 7,300 new books so far for those clinics. Then when the pandemic hit, we had to shift our focus a little because recruitment of new clinics has been on hiatus. So we went back to the Department of Education, who administers our state funding, and with their blessing, we are moving forward with purchasing book bundles for the 0 to 6-month-old children, which we know are the ones being seen in person in the clinics the most right now. And we wanted to really meet families where they are right now. And our clinics are really excited about getting these book bundles. So there will be 3 books in the bundle, similar to what you see on your screen, that are very appropriate for that age group. And we know that that infant and newborn stage is already a vulnerable and stressful time, but especially so now. So this was one of the ways that we could meet families where they were in this time. So we're very appreciative for that funding. Next, we continue our work with Books Count, which is our early math initiative. So we just learned that we received additional funding from the Heising-Simons Foundation to continue this work. So over the course of 18 months, we will be rolling this out to 50 additional Minnesota clinics, in addition to, of course, the 3 that were part of the first wave of the pilot. And we'll do this using an online training platform. And we do this in partnership with 5 other states and our national office. So we're really excited to move this forward. And finally, we recognize that a lot of our partnerships are sort of on pause right now, but we had a super collaborative year in 2019. We really, I think, gained momentum with our partners and the Little Moments Count initiative. We continued our pilot with the Minnesota Children's Museum, and then we forged new collaborations and conversations with both the St. Paul Public Library and the Hennepin County Public Library. So before I move on, as many of you know, Dr. Chawla resigned as our medical director this year to accept the very important position of medical director for Medicaid for the state. Although he is still on our board and obviously still willing to tell dad jokes for us whenever we need him to. So thanks, Nate. Dr. Chawla has been involved with Reach Out and Read longer than I have. He's been with us for over 10 years. He started when he was a resident and joined our advisory committee, and then he quickly became our medical director a couple years later. And Nate has really transformed the medical director role into a much more public-facing role that's just absolutely critical to our organization. So a few quotes from others about Nate. Dr. Karen Elhai, our board chair. Among Nate's many contributions to Reach Out and Read Minnesota, the one I personally value the most is that he helped drive the board to use an equity lens to help focus every decision we make. And guys, please feel free to use the chat to send me a message if you have a message for him, and we will share with him later. From Dr. Depesh Navsaria, who's the Reach Out and Read director in Wisconsin and also the vice chair of our national board of directors. Dr. Chawla is one of the most thoughtful, careful thinkers about not only what improves, protects, and promotes the well-being of children and their families, but also about how we can move towards a world in which all children and families can avail themselves of those resources. I'm disappointed to lose Nate's direct leadership in the Reach Out and Read world, but at the same time, so happy to have him guiding Minnesota's Medicaid program as a safeguard and promoter for the state's most vulnerable. Depesh also wanted to point out that Nate failed to wear a bow tie when he was surprised with the Gretchen Hunsberger Award at our National Leadership Conference. See the next slide for evidence. That's his final jab at you, Nate. And finally, I give the last word to Lynn Burke, our longtime former executive director. And anyone who knows Lynn, and she is on the call right now, knows that I had to condense this greatly for time. But Nate, I will make sure to give you the full transcript later. Nate's strategic vision and tenacity helped us build one of the biggest, strongest ROR affiliates in the country, one of the few that is an independent, standalone nonprofit. His jokes always make us laugh and remind us how important it is to keep adversity in perspective as a motivator to do better, not something to fear. It has been said that more people line up behind promise, purpose, and possibility than behind problems, and that's surely why Nate's successful. He inspires all of us to not only do better at whatever it is that we do, but he proves that by writing our own stories, we can help others write theirs too. So thank you, Nate, for your work as medical director, and I know the guidance that you'll continue to give us in the future. So now I have the distinct pleasure of welcoming Dr. Megan Gunnar. Many of you are familiar with her work and her research. Her research translates into so much of the work that we do every day here at Reach Out and Read. Dr. Gunnar is the director of the Institute of Child Development and the associate director of the Center for Neurobehavioral Development at the University of Minnesota. She is a Regents Professor, the highest honor awarded at the university. Dr. Gunnar has spent her career studying how stress biology affects human brain and behavioral development and the processes that help children regulate stress hormones. Dr. Gunnar is involved in many activities to translate this research on early development for use by policymakers, practitioners, and families. So thank you, Dr. Gunnar, and over to you.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to stop my video so you don't see me here trying to work through my slides. It's wonderful to be with you. This is such an important organization, and reading is so important for young children. I've been asked to talk a bit about brain architecture, how it develops, and how reading fits into the development of resilience that children need these days and may need in the future even more. So that's what we're going to talk about. Next slide, please. So what does it take to build a healthy brain? It's probably not a surprise to you all that it takes more than having just healthy genes. Those are important, of course. It also takes having the right supportive experiences. Now, our genes help us determine where certain kinds of nerve cells go so that we end up having a human brain and not a rat brain or a monkey brain or a cat brain. So it lays down that basic blueprint. But it is experience that in interaction with the genetic code helps create that wiring of the brain, which is what we use for being able to process information. We talk about it as the connectome. So it helps develop each one of us unique human connectome or connections of our brain. And what this means is the brain literally becomes what the brain thinks about as it's putting together that wiring diagram. Our brain become what the brain does. And so we want to be sure that the brain is doing things that really help support its development. Next slide, please. There's a developmental, oh, I did not realize that all of this would come up. So thank you. Go ahead and work your way through until you get to there, stop. There's a developmental process, of course, in how this works. And if you touch your hands to the back of your head, you're going to be touching the area called the occipital lobe. And this is the region where we have sensory pathways, vision and hearing, and these begin to wire up first. As the baby's vision becomes more acute and be able to hear better and link up hearing and sound and touch. So creating a coherent input. Next, we see the regions that are important for language beginning to develop. And they begin to develop way earlier than most people think. Long before children say their first words, children are beginning to process language and beginning to understand certain words. And understanding typically comes before production. And then comes the development of these higher order cognitive functions that involve the prefrontal cortex, that frontal region of your brain. And those begin to develop much earlier than we might have thought too. And they continue to develop way into adolescence and early adulthood. The sloping down there that you see is what we talk about as pruning. So as you get these connections, and some of that's under genetic determination, now you keep the ones that you are actually using to process information and you let go of the others. This makes for a more efficient brain, but if there hasn't been much rich input to your brain, you're losing more connections than you ultimately might need to engage in a very complex society such as the ones that we have. Could we go to the next slide, please? Now, you've got to wonder what nature was thinking, because we have the most complex brain on the planet. It needs stimulation in order to develop, and yet we are born completely helpless to provide our brains with the stimulation that it needs for normal brain development. Next slide, please. But what nature was thinking is that the brain develops in the context of relationships. All of those wonderful relationships that babies have with parents and siblings and grandparents and other children are terribly important for providing the stuff that the baby thinks about. And it's not just being hugged and kissed and being able to look at your parents and your siblings' faces. All of that's terribly, terribly important. But human beings interact heavily through verbal communication. We talk and we talk and we talk and we talk. And that language-rich environment is so important for brain development. Next slide, please. Oops, I gotta see what my next slide is. Because language helps us think. Language frees us up from the here and the now. It allows us to think about things that aren't right there in front of us. Words stand for concepts. And each concept we learn opens up new horizons, gives us new ways of thinking about things. We use language, of course, to communicate with others. That's the big reason. But we also use language to communicate with ourselves. What's so fun about watching young children learning their language is that initially they communicate out loud with themselves. So they talk themselves through what they're going to do. With development, that becomes more interiorized. So we are constantly in that interior conversation with ourselves about what we want to think about, what we're going to do next, et cetera, et cetera. All of that is so important for us to be able to regulate our own behavior. Next slide, please. And what we know is that during these early years, a language-rich environment results in much larger vocabulary. Children, and each word is a concept, so many more concepts that the child is able to think about than a language-poor environment. And this is happening, again, earlier than we might think. This is the vocabulary that a child produces. and shift it back a number of months because the child is able to understand this vocabulary long before they actually are able to produce it. If we go to the next slide, we'll see that this graph, and click through it. Oh, get through the slide. Sorry, I didn't know that all of this was still in there. Okay, now try the next slide. There, the growth of language mirrors what we see as from the growth of brain matter. The gray matter of the brain are the nerve cells that we are connecting up with one another. And in a language-rich environment, we see many more connections and a larger, really basically a larger brain resulting. Okay, next slide. Language is also critically important, as I've suggested, for the development of cognitive self-control, what we call executive functions, the capacity to keep thoughts in mind, to control our behaviors, to anticipate what's going to happen next. So children controlling for age who have a larger, higher levels of language development are also at higher levels of self-control or executive functions. Next slide. Executive functions, the self-regulatory part of the brain, is being directed by that prefrontal region of the brain, that part that is colored in at the front there. This region is involved in top-down guidance of what we pay attention to and what we're thinking about. It helps us inhibit inappropriate actions, even though they may be habitual actions, especially habitual actions, and to regulate our emotion. All of this is critically important if we are going to develop resilience. Much of what is happening here takes a long time to develop. Parents, of course, provide the scaffolding. We are our children's prefrontal cortex for a long time as we help them develop that prefrontal cortex. But as I've indicated, language really helps here. Next slide, please. And this is where reading comes in. You do not have to read to your child in order to help your child develop, to create a language-rich environment. There are oral traditions of storytelling where children learn really long stories, and that's helping memory. And I certainly know I spent a lot of time with my children going over Mom, just tell me that story again about when. And those are autobiographical stories. But reading helps. Reading gives us another avenue. And in a society where we need to develop the capacity to read automatically. I don't know if you've ever tried to stop yourself from reading something. It's almost impossible because we are readers. We process language and reading without even thinking about it. And that's necessary. So starting young is great. I'm glad we're doing that 0 to 6 month book drop because it's providing all sorts of great stimulation. This little girl, whose name is Dahlia, and she is my granddaughter, is obviously probably not processing the words yet, but she is certainly beginning to connect sound and vision, and she is fascinated by these beautiful pictures. And those parents read to Dahlia a lot. She even has books on physics, which seems a little bit advanced. But Reach Out and Read is really wonderful in helping families create that language environment that we're going to need to develop healthy brain architecture and be resilient. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gunnar. This was incredibly helpful. And as someone who has an early reader at home, I can echo it's absolutely fascinating to watch this process with her. And she really can't stop reading things now that she's started, and it's been really neat. We had a lot of comments just saying how interesting and helpful and informative this was. We don't have any open questions right now, so I think for the sake of time, we will move on to the next thing. But if you do have questions, audience, for Dr. Gunnar, please continue to post them and we can get them to her to be answered later. So thank you again. And next, we have a presentation of our inaugural Dr. Gerald Gilchrist Award. And you'll hear from the man himself in a moment. But a little background, Dr. Gilchrist retired from a storied career as a pediatric oncologist at the Mayo Clinic. And he was actually, in his retirement, one of the early supporters of Reach Out and Read Minnesota. He acted as an advisory board member, a donor, and to this day is just an all-around champion of our program and our expansion. So this is the first year, but this award going forward will honor a doctor or another medical provider who has been exceptional as a trainer, a clinician, or a clinical director, one whose exemplary personal and professional medical leadership has helped to make delivery of the Reach Out and Read model all it can be in pediatric primary care. And you'll see from this video that Dr. Gilchrist retains his sense of humor.
Reach Out and Read provides unique access to reading skills with the so-called authority of the child's primary caregiver. Whether it be a doctor, a nurse practitioner, the important thing is that both the parents and the child are introduced to culturally appropriate, age-appropriate reading and given the skills to read with one another. It's the ability of the program to influence so many lives is remarkable. And it truly has been a passion of mine ever since I was introduced to the program through Lynn Baker after Art Rolnick's lecture. So thank you for honoring me. I feel truly honored, and I look forward to Reach Out and Read growing and flourishing in the future. Thanks.
Thank you to Dr. Gilchrist, and as he noted, he originally met Lynn, our executive director, at an event hosted by Art Rolnick, who is on the call right now. So thanks to him for facilitating that connection. So we were fortunate to have quite a few nominees this year, and the committee selected Dr. Thomas Schreiner as the inaugural winner. Dr. Schreiner is the medical director for the White Earth Health Center on the White Earth Indian Reservation. He has been a dedicated medical provider for many years and has led the Reach Out and Read program there since 2009. He's always accessible, and he ensures that any new staff understand the Reach Out and Read model and are supported. He's super responsive, and he entirely understands the importance of early brain development. So I'll let him share his own story now.
Hi, I'm Dr. Tom Schreiner, pediatrician and captain in the Commissioned Corps of the United States Public Health Service. I'm stationed with the White Earth Service Unit operated by the Indian Health Service and located on the White Earth Reservation. It consists of 3 clinics, the main clinic located in White Earth and satellite clinics located in the communities of Pine Point and Natawash. Together, we have an active user population of approximately 10,000, of which about half are under the age of 18. I am honored to be the inaugural recipient of the Dr. Gilchrist Reach Out and Read Award. Reach Out and Read is an integral part of our well child care. Parents today face an unprecedented challenge in raising their children in the age of electronic media. Reading is not often seen as a valuable asset, and parents often choose not to spend or are unable to spend money on purchasing books. We are pleased to be able to provide books to these parents and are thrilled that Reach Out and Read provides these books, and many of which incorporate the Ojibwe language, which many of the younger members of the tribe do not have an active ability to speak. So this is helpful in teaching their children some of the language. Again, thank you for this award, and thank you, Reach Out and Read, for the books that you provide to our clinics. Thank you and have a great day.
So that is actually the perfect segue into our next brief video because our next person on video is herself a member, a citizen of the White Earth Nation of Ojibwe, and she's actually the highest ranking Native American woman in the country right now. So without further introduction, I will introduce this video from our Lieutenant Governor, Peggy Flanagan.
Hi, Minnesota. This is Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan. I'm so excited to be part of your Reach Out and Read celebration today as you work to bring literacy to our littlest Minnesotans. You have a lot to celebrate this last year with the expansions into Greater Minnesota and serving more children and families all across the state. The first few years of a child's life are really crucial to their overall development. Introducing books and reading during that time, even though they're not ready to read on their own, is a crucial part of development. We teach kids to be readers and learners from a young age. We see better outcomes in schools, in graduation rates, and they lead healthier and happier lives. This is also how we work to increase educational equity and combat our opportunity gaps, prioritizing each and every Minnesota child, especially our children of color, Indigenous children, and children from low-income families. The governor and I are grateful for the work of Reach Out and Read, and we want to make this a reality for all children. The outcomes of your work have a society-wide impact. These are priorities for our administration, and we are doing this work through the agencies that are all part of the Children's Cabinet. I know several of our advisory council members from the cabinet are with you there this morning or here virtually. Thank you for all of the work that you do alongside us to lift up children and families and our littlest Minnesotans. Taking the whole family approach is foundational to the work of our Children's Cabinet. Your work is investing in what the whole child looks like, knowing that physical, mental, social, and emotional health go together. Reach Out and Read provides an important service in connecting all types of health and well-being together. Investing in our young children and investing in their parents and families is critical to our One Minnesota goals. When kids get books from their pediatrician, it shows them that their mental and emotional health is just as important as their physical health. At a time when there's so much uncertainty in the world, reading together is more important than ever. It reduces stress and helps our kids build connections. As we work to build trust between families and services around them, especially the healthcare community during this time, programs like Reach Out and Read are really critical to help facilitate these relationships. Our kids, my kid included, are asking really big questions about the world around them, and they care about their communities. This is one way that we can show them how much we care about them. Thank you for all you do, and thank you for all the work that we will do together to make sure that our littlest Minnesotans are seen and heard and valued and become lifelong readers. Thank you.
So thank you so much to the Lieutenant Governor and to her staff for making this video for us. So next, I introduce Dr. Karen Elhai, who is the chair of our board of directors. Dr. Elhai is a retired pediatrician who can't seem to retire, but she has provided amazing leadership on our board as the chair for the last 6 years. Go ahead, Karen.
Good morning, and thank you everybody for joining us. I am honored to be the chair of the board of Reach Out and Read Minnesota. I would like to thank our sponsors once again for their coming through for us in a time when they had an awful lot on their plates already. Our executive sponsor, Health Partners, our leadership sponsor, Children's of Minnesota, and our literacy partners, Allina Health, Minnesota Health Fairview, UCare, and All About Books. I'd also like to thank Dr. Gunnar and Lieutenant Governor Flanagan for their participation today. Amidst all the turmoil and uncertainty of the last couple of months, it's been heartening to me to hear the stories of all the big and little things that Minnesotans and the world have done to help each other out, from friends, family, strangers, helping us all come together. Those are the things that I want to remember. I would love to forget how to make a no-sew mask, 25 creative bean recipes, and all those images of do-it-yourself haircuts. I'm here to ask you to do one more thing for our youngest Minnesota learners. Because as we work toward a new normal, those little brains will still be developing, and our message of family bonding and reading together to support that development will be more important than ever. So please consider making a donation to us and support our goal of reaching every child in Minnesota. If you're able, I'd especially like to ask you to consider making it a recurrent monthly donation. For as little as $5 a month, And over that course of that year, you can support 2 children in our program for the whole first 5 years of their well child checks. And because they told me there would be no math on Thursdays, I will let you figure out the impact of $10 or even more a month. You're on your computer already, so you can just click away from my do-it-yourself haircut and over to reachoutandreadmn.org and hit the big blue donate button. If you're having a difficult time financially, we certainly understand. There are many other ways that you can support us. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and by liking, sharing, and retweeting our posts, it spreads the word of our work and keeps you informed as well. Our website is also a great source of information, opportunities to support us, and news of any upcoming events. And when you do get to the point where you're looking for a nonprofit to support, we hope you'll keep us in mind. Thank you once again for your time and support of Minnesota's children in the ways that each of you do on a daily basis. Before I introduce our last speaker, I'd like to close my remarks with a quote from many of my favorite children's books. The end. I did not say it was going to be an inspirational quote. For that, I would like to turn this over now to our new medical director, Dr. Gigi Chawla. You probably know and recognize her as the Chief of General Pediatrics at Children's Hospitals and Clinics, where she wears many other hats as well. We are thrilled that she has added the Reach Out and Read Minnesota Medical Director hat to her wardrobe. Her clinical, teaching, leadership, and advocacy experience that she's going to bring to this role is going to be invaluable as we navigate our own future growth and development. Dr. Chawla?
Well, thank you, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. Perfect. Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you for that introduction, Dr. Elhai. And I'm so excited to meet and partner with you all over the course of the next years. I hope. It's such a bummer to be meeting virtually like this, but we will give this a try. I am also going to turn my screen off because, like Dr. Gunnar had mentioned, it is incredibly distracting to watch yourself at the same time that you're trying to speak. And this is such a difficult position to try to follow the Lieutenant Governor and Dr. Gunnar after they've spoken so eloquently. I think we should ask the Lieutenant Governor to potentially be our medical director, because she so succinctly said everything that there is to say about why Reach Out and Read is so critical for all of our youngest Minnesotans. I'll take the next slide, Liam. So I'm Gigi Chawla, your new medical director, and this is certainly a step into change for me as well. My current role is at Children's, where I've been for 19 years and have very squarely been in operations there as well. I'll take the next slide. So my own story, I thought, is what I'd start with for reflecting, pivoting, and stepping into change. And then next, I'll talk about how Children's Minnesota has done that, how I think all of our general pediatricians across Minnesota will have to do that, and how Reach Out and Read is also planning nationally to reflect, pivot, and step into that change that COVID-19 has brought. For my own story to start, I'm a pediatrician and hospital medicine doctor who is really specialized in the care of complex needs pediatrics. And about a decade ago or so, I'm embarrassed to say, I had my reflection point in which a family that is very similar to the youngster there in the middle slide, who was born prematurely and had really outgrown a lot of his premature chronic health conditions by age 10. I was in a situation with his mom, mom is a nurse, in an exam room, and she had talked about how our clinic visits together had helped her really medically bond with her child. She felt very adept at all, G-tube feeds and everything that needed to happen. But now that her child had outgrown a lot of those medical issues and concerns, she no longer felt like she knew how to bond with her child. And that point of reflection for me was really a recognition that I hadn't done enough to support the parent bond that is needed for all children. So my pivoting point was really to first reach out and read, and every other aspect that I could pull into medical visits to ensure that patients and their parents were really absorbing how critical and important that human-to-human connection is, not just the medical connection. And for me, stepping into change really involved me in advocacy, and I think I started with Mayor Betsy Hodges' Cradle to K cabinet, Governor Dayton's Interagency Council for Children with Disabilities, and now hope to do that with this medical director role for Reach Out and Read. I'll take the next slide. Children's Minnesota also, at least in my journey, has had reflection, pivoting, and stepping into change. Initially, we were, Reach Out and Read was grant funded at 2 of our clinics and not the other 10. And we were unable to secure that grant funding. In 2016, we made the decision to place Reach Out and Read funding into operations for all of our 12 primary care clinics. But in a downturn in 2017, that operational support was removed, which then caused me to appeal the decision, then, transition to pivot actually to the foundation, writing grants, fundraising on my own. And then in an effort to really understand where the points of leverage were, to involve our professional staff. And it was really that understanding for children that the professional staff were so committed to Reach Out and Read that Children's as an organization stepped into change again and was able to fund Reach Out and Read in operations at all 12 of our primary care clinics. And so I would just use this story as a means to say, if Children's can do it, I know we can find ways to ensure that every healthcare organization in Minnesota can do the same. I'll take the next slide. I think COVID-19 has really opened our eyes as well to the pivoting and stepping into change that we'll all need to do as primary care clinics and entities. Our standard well child care, where we, in addition to screening for health and development and parent-child bonding, offer parent support, do our preventative care discussions and immunizations, we do that with Reach Out and Read. And right now, the CDC, American Academy of Pediatrics, and Health Department has really prioritized the care of kids 2 and under, which leaves out a chunk of the patients for whom we really lean in for Reach Out and Read. And families are notably still scared to come in for visits, and likely will still be scared to come in for visits, even when the stay-at-home order or the essential definitions have changed, because of the outfit here that we're all wearing when we see our patients. There are, of course, those missed opportunities for depression screening and developmental screening, our missed opportunities to screen for social determinants of health. But for Reach Out and Read, it's our missed opportunities to promote literacy, to really evaluate that parent-child bonding and support it, to promote school and academic success through literacy, and to therefore reduce that cycle of poverty and bias. And in summary, then, that we're going to see, we are seeing a disruption in Reach Out and Read, a disruption in preventative health and supporting social determinants of health screening, and a disruption in supporting parent-child bonding. I'll take the next slide. In addition, we all know that in primary care, a lot of what we do is mental health care. And that what we're seeing right now is fear, anxiety, depression, and every other emotion that there could possibly be for both our patients and their grown-ups. For teenagers, we're seeing, the lack of that identity development as they're stuck at home with their parents and not socializing as much as they would like and need to, and their lack of autonomy and independence is noted. But also for our youngest patients, toxic stress is a high potential. Families are still scared to come in for those mental health concerns in primary care. And we're leaning into promoting telehealth and virtual care, but we know that that's going to offer challenges with interpreter needs and technology gaps. And in summary, I believe that's going to create more disparities. And there'll be a significant increase in our mental health disease burden with COVID-19 for our grown-ups and our patients. And we already knew that we had a pre-existing constrained resource in our mental health providers. The place that I'd also like to talk about is that we're likely to see an increase in toxic stress and the response of that. Next slide. First, to highlight our pivot point, and that is really to lean into science. And what we know here from Dr. Shonkoff and others is that the basic science of pediatrics is kind of a tripod here of environment, brain development, and epigenetics. Next slide. And for those of you who have not had an opportunity to see the Harvard Center, the Developing Child for Toxic Stress, this is really a wonderful resource. I encourage you all to take a look at it. It's very digestible and easy to translate to anyone. Next slide. But in summary, I'll try to give it a shot, and kind of embarrassing to do this with Dr. Gunnar, who's probably the leading national expert in this. So Dr. Gunnar, please feel free to correct me after all of this, but hopefully you've schooled me well. Hopefully you've schooled me well. So in summary, you know, just in a snapshot, there's lots of aspects that can impact a young child in their development, and though stress for each of us is normal, toxic stress is that overwhelming stress situation in which those natural endorphins are truly remaining elevated at all times, and there isn't those natural abilities for our body to not be so reactive. Next slide. And we also know that with prolonged elevation of cortisol and other endorphins, that it can actually change our DNA, and so these young children's DNA, for those proteins to read or express DNA that has been either not read or read before. And though toxic stress is an individual response, we can also look at that as a population health level. And when we do so, we call that adverse childhood experiences, and that there are these defined odds ratios and diseases that we can see with adverse childhood experiences. And specifically, that's why families can say things like, alcoholism runs in my family, because their DNA is really coded for that. Next slide. So the way that I see this all really rolled together, starting at the 6 o'clock position, is that it is, when we think about the science of pediatrics and what we are all doing and having to navigate together, it really is that environmental exposure and toxic stress for our youngest children at the 6 o'clock position. And then to the 2 o'clock position, to what Dr. Gunnar had talked about there for our specific patients and their brain development in a toxic stress environment, those natural developmental curves that we all expect could be blunted or even delayed in a toxic stress environment. And then over to the 10 o'clock position there, that putting it all together, not only is it that own child whose brain is being impacted, but also all of their progeny to follow could have these odds ratio type of clinical and medical concerns, which will certainly change the trajectory of pediatric and adult healthcare. And so the summary for me is that pediatricians, knowing all of this, must step into change through advocacy and collaboration. Next slide. Reach Out and Read has also done our reflection and pivoting and need to step into change. And this is from the national level of Reach Out and Read. Really the recognition and reflection here is that this is an unprecedented a time of stress confronting families, that this crisis is highlighting and exacerbating all the systemic inequities that we know were pre-existing and that we are creating today. And that systems typically that offer support are under stress too, really like the school systems, daycare, and others. Next slide. And so the pivot point really is that we must all think to help and encourage love and security during this time of extreme anxiety. So beyond literacy, we must recognize that Reach Out and Read really is a safe harbor for our patients. And lastly, that telehealth really is a unique opportunity for us to see families in their own homes. Next slide. And so the stepping into change nationally that we're already exploring is infection control guidance, really around books that we would offer in our clinics that families can take home, tip sheets for families, home activities that families can use. We're looking at ways to stabilize funding, working with authors and publishers to make high quality ebooks available and for free, and to create initial resources that could be used for all clinicians in a telehealth model to really understand how we do this new care model change for Reach Out and Read. And I think many of you have seen already, Dr. Chomolo has added his, as well as many other pediatricians and others, about Read Together and creating a video so that families can do this out loud and with volunteers. Next slide. And so in summary for Reach Out and Read, you know, this first phase of responding to the pandemic, we're all trying to navigate this together and recognize what our current issues are and mitigate any of the challenges in real time and for the short term. But in the post-COVID era, we'll really need to consider how we do this in a telehealth model and in a new way. And in that third point there, we want to make sure that we are doing this in a way that we bring our knowledge of the toxic stress environment that may be created for our children, recognizing that Reach Out and Read is such a pivotal time to really lean into childhood development and to set up our families for success and reduce any type of disparity and bias. That's my last slide.
Thank you so much, Gigi. We really appreciate that. There was one question that I think could be for you or for Dr. Gunnar, and so we'll ask this one question because I think it's really relevant right now, and then we will wrap up to let everyone get on with their days of working and homeschooling their kids. So this is about screen time, and the question is, they were interested in knowing about what this sort of influx of children on screens right now and the impact of that on children's language development. If either of you could speak to that just for a moment or provide a resource for folks to further research that.
Gigi, do you want to take this, or I could?
Boy, I'm really hoping you take it, Dr. Gunnar.
Okay. As in all things, we have to think developmentally. So very young children who are just learning language do not learn language from watching screens. And that means up to probably about 2.5 years of age. As we get older, yes, we can learn new words from what we're watching on screens. So it's not as much of a concern. But the youngest ones are not going to learn language from screens. They need the social interaction. And there's some wonderful work out of the University of Washington that shows us this in very, very powerful ways. On the other hand, young children also do very well when their parents push themselves to the max by not having their kids on screen and trying to be perfect parents during a period of time when it's just too hard. So let's balance things out. If you need to let your child watch a little bit more on screens these days so you can keep your mental sanity so you don't end up exploding and yelling at people or falling down in a heap, that's reasonable. But we, of course, need, let's be real here, guys. But planning in that time, if you can, to have family rich, and it doesn't have to be extra time. Having a good conversation while you're eating dinner is great. Helping your child read the boxes while you're cooking dinner or something. I mean, this is fine. So children do best when their parents are functioning well. Keep that at the top of your head. That's all.
Thank you so much. And that wraps up our program today. So I want to just take a moment to again thank our sponsors for continuing their support of us in this time. I want to thank our panelists and all of the people that were with us today listening and contributing. We really, really appreciate you. This will be available as a recording after, so please share it with others, and you'll hear from us again soon. So thanks everyone and have a great day.